We are about to embark on a 48-hour side quest for the Amazing Readathon where short books are going to come in clutch. Today, I have a bunch of recommendations for you. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For a Pause in a Book. I make bookish videos over here on my little corner of the internet, so if that's something you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today I have a bunch of novella and short book recommendations for you to add to your TBR before Face Off Weekend. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, Face Off Weekend is the 48-hour side quest that is happening for the Amazing Readathon, and this is a readathon that I created. It's happening during the month of June. I will have the announcement video up above. It's not too late to join. You can just join at whatever leg that we are currently at. So as long as you're watching this in the month of June, you're good. And if you're watching this after June and you're just trying to meet your reading goals or try to find some short books, stick around because I've got you. For this video, I am going to be structuring this based on the themes of the Amazing Readathon, so I will have timestamps down below. However, during Face Off, the extra bonuses for your team genre do not apply, so you can read outside of your genre. It's a great palette cleanse, a great way to like refresh yourself halfway through the month. But I will have timestamps down below for everything, so we will have fantasy, sci-fi, spooky, which is like mysteries, thrillers, and horrors, romance, and then fiction and historical fiction. I have about 4 to 5 for each of the genres. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start with our fantasy books. I'm going to start with a really easy one and then we will get a little bit more niche, but I think the most obvious answer for a fantasy novella is the Wayward Children series. So this is the first one, Every Heart a Doorway. These are portal fantasy stories where children have these worlds created for them that are exactly the way they see the world, exactly the way they need the world to be, and so they walk through a door, they get their world or whatever. I think there are 9 books in this series at this point. Honestly, I haven't counted. There's a lot of them, and they go back and forth from these children's worlds to reality every other book, roughly, where they have to kind of deal with the reality and real world and what happens if they can't find their door again. This is a really whimsical story, but I think it also deals with a lot of hard topics and it has a lot of good discussions. There's a lot of representation, both with queer identities as well as different body types, different ethnicities, different like neurodivergence, everything. Like, there's so much representation in these books, and I absolutely love this series. I have binged it all in a weekend before, and it's a really great way to digest the story. Then we have the Spindle Splintered duology. So first up we have a Spindle Splintered and then a Mirror Mended. This is a Sleeping Beauty meets the Spider-Verse kind of story. I definitely like the first one more than I liked the second one. I really enjoyed this book. This is about a woman who has a terminal illness and she pricks her finger on a spindle and ends up going into this world and is has to like save the world essentially. And then all of these other Sleeping Beauties from different stories also come in, hence the like Spider-Verse, right? And this is a continuation of it. I don't think that the story needed a continuation, which is why I didn't like this one as much, but they're still great books. They're also very queer, so that's always a win. Then we have Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher actually writes a ton of different novellas, both in the fantasy and the horror genre, so you will see her name come up again. But this is another kind of Sleeping Beauty retelling, but told from a very different perspective. It's not told from Sleeping Beauty, it's actually told from one of the fairies, and it's Toadling's story, who was stolen away from her family by the fairies as a baby, and then as an adult she is asked to bring a human back and bless it. Which seems like an easy task, but obviously it's not because they're the Fae. This is also a very whimsical story. It's very folktale-esque, and that it just has that style of writing. It wasn't necessarily my favorite, but I know people that have absolutely loved it. If you couldn't tell, we are doing very quick reviews to try to get you to read these books. So my final book on the fantasy list is going to be A Prelude of Ashes by Tiago Abdallah. This is Point 5, or the prequel novella to the Ashes of Avron series, which is A Touch of Light, and then A Shade of Madness is the second book. This one I actually read before reading A Touch of Light. I know people that have done both. Like, they've read this one and then they read this, but also I started here and I got just as much out of it. I think that this is a really good way to introduce yourself to Tiago's writing, because like, he does not hold your hand in this book at all, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about this. This is a great introduction to his writing style, to the way that he just kind of like throws you into the deep end and like hope for the best. And it's a very atmospheric book, despite it being only 137 pages. Like the world building is fantastic. And like, listen, if you learn nothing from me, Tiago's writing is amazing. And you should read all of the books. But you could start here this weekend and maybe read this afterwards. Let's move on to romance. Now, I could give you so many options for this. Romance novellas, they hit different, okay? They are so much fun to read because you, for lack of a better term, get in, get out, get on with your life. Not saying anything. Okay, moving on. Let's start with Katie Robert. Katie Robert has a couple of different novellas that would be fantastic for this. We have the Wicked Villain Shorts, which is the end of the Wicked Villain series, so like you wouldn't really be able to read this if you hadn't read the Wicked Villains. This one I'm actually planning on reading during Face Off weekend. But a couple that I have read, she has a contemporary series that starts with Your Dad Will Do, which is like just pure smut. It's just pure smut. This is about an ex-boyfriend's dad and her getting together. Definitely an age gap romance. There's actually 4 different stories in this series, but this is the only one that I have read. Could be another one that I read during the weekend. And then there is a prequel novella to the Dark Olympus series, which is Stoneheart, and this is Medusa and Calypso's story. It's a super quick, about 112-page sapphic romance about a girl who is tasked to kill another girl and instead falls in love. It's real sexy. And then we have a couple of contemporary romance novellas that I've really enjoyed in the past. So the first one that we have is My Fake Canadian Wife by M. Hollis. I do not talk about this book very often. It's a book that I read years and years ago. I think I actually got it as like one of my very first NetGalley arcs. So that's saying something. I think it was still a really fun time. It was a fun book, and I think it was definitely less than 200 pages. This is about a woman from Brazil, and she is about to get deported. So she has to figure that out real quickly. She meets this woman, they agree to like have a fake marriage so that she can get her green card, and then obviously like we're going to have some real feelings, fake dating, fake marriage to real feelings. That pipeline, you know. It is a very quick romance. Obviously, when you have a romance novella, you have to speed a relationship along. So it kind of feels insta-lovey, but it was a really, really good time. One book that I think does the speed the relationship along really well is Get It Right by Sky Kylene. This is one of the Love It Lockdown series. I think there's actually 3 novellas in this, and they're all on KU, which is fantastic. And this is like a pre-existing relationship or a pre-existing friendship. So we have a lesbian parolee and a pansexual nurse in the jail, and so then when she gets out of jail, they kind of like meet up again and they form a friendship that becomes more. This book is so steamy. So steamy, and there's so much queer representation in this. And then my last romance recommendation is going to be Treble by Rosie Adams. This is actually the first book by Rosie Adams that I have read, and it was phenomenal, and I will definitely be reading more. This is, again, a pre-existing relationship. So we have a married couple in an open relationship, and they happen to both be dating the same woman at the same time. And they find out, but instead of getting mad because they're in an open relationship, they all go back to the hotel together, and it is a good smutty time. This book doesn't have a ton of plot. There's not a lot of story to it, but it's a smutty good time. And if that's what you're looking for, this book. Okay, let's swing to the complete other side of the spectrum here, and let's go to Team Spooky. Okay, I love a good horror novella. Probably, like, if you think about novellas, I think horror is the one that I gravitate to the most because you can get real scary real fast. So I have 2 recommendations from T. Kingfisher. Like I said, she's showing up again. What Moves the Dead, and there is a sequel to this, although I have not read the sequel. It is on my Libby holds right now, so I'm kind of hoping that I can get to it this weekend. But this is a gothic nature horror, and here's the thing, I was never scared of mushrooms prior to this book, but now they're a little bit more terrifying. And moss? What? This is a gothic retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher, which I am not familiar with the original book, but this one was very atmospheric, very moody, and I had a really good time reading it, and I'm excited to read the sequel. And then this one is probably my favorite book from T. Kingfisher, but it is one of her longer ones, at least of the like novella size, and that is A House with Good Bones. This is another like really gothic story, and I think if you like What Moves the Dead, you'll like this one, and vice versa. This book has almost a sentient house. Like the house is a character. So our main character goes back to her childhood home only to realize that what the character and the quaintness of her childhood home is no longer there. Gone are the cluttered walls and the pictures and frames and all the stuff. Now it is a sterile white interior. Her mother is jumping at the smallest noise, and it's up to our main character to find out why. Just why exactly, what it is that has her mother so scared. I can't have a quick horror recommendation without adding Darcy Coates onto this list, and one of the ones that I think reads the fastest and also is one of the most accessible books for people that are like just starting out with Darcy is The Fullcroft Ghost, and this is, I think it's actually one of her YA books, but it kind of reads like a bridge book because we have these two children as our main characters, but we also have the grandparents. So these children are sent off to their grandparents because their mother was in a car accident. So there's a little bit of grief, horror involved. She's not dead, but they don't really know what's going on, right? She's in the hospital, and so everything's very uncertain. So they go to live with their grandparents, and their grandparents, like when you meet them, you're like, they're just weird old people, okay? The phones have to go in a bucket. Like we have very bad service. Like it's setting itself up for this really tropey horror book, but at the same time, you don't trust anything. You don't trust the grandparents. You don't trust the townspeople. Darcy is one of my favorite horror authors for the sole reason that when she builds a world and she builds the characters, she builds so much around it. And even if, I mean, this book is 237 pages, so it's a little bit on the long side as far as like novella length, but there is so much that is packed into this book. The audiobook I think is like 6 hours long. It's very short. It feels like a full story. It feels so atmospheric, and that's one of the things that Darcy does best. And like I'll recommend Darcy all day. I have a whole shelf of her books. But if we're talking about like quick short reads, this is a fantastic place for you to start. Lastly, one of the most unsettling horror novellas that I have ever read, and that is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. I am going to put the caveat out there that I only gave this book 3 stars. This book has an audience. It's gross, it's gory, it's weird, there are bugs, there is, this book is a fever dream of the highest regard. This book is about a family who is in the middle of a tornado, and so they lock themselves in the bathroom, and then like hell breaks loose. And I do mean that literally. There's gore, there's bugs, there's blood, there's like this is an unsettling book, to say the least. So if you would want that, this is a great recommendation. Now I'm going to move on to some contemporary and historical fiction novellas, or quick reads anyways. So the first one is Evidence of the Affair by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is an 88-page novella, and it's told completely in like letter format, and it's these two people talking back and forth in letters, describing the affair that their spouses are having. And I think it's just a really interesting look at heartbreak and like loss and coming to terms with that. And it's a really interesting way to tell a story like that. Like it's just done in these two letters, these back and forth letters between two strangers, that like their spouses are having an affair. And so they are brought together. The universe has brought them together. And so they are commiserating, essentially. It's classic Taylor Jenkins Reid writing. It's like classic drama, classic like heartbreak. Highly recommend. The next one is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Maruta. I probably am pronouncing that wrong. I do apologize. But this is about a woman who has this undue pressure from her family and her friends and everyone around her to like just be more, right? To move up the corporate ladder, to do more with her life. And she's like, I am cool being a clerk at a grocery store. I just want to like live my life. I just want to like meander and just kind of coast. And there's this internal battle between trying to follow her family's guidance and also like just listening to her heart and just trying to like be happy. This is very much a character-driven story. There's not like a ton of plot to it. It's a slice of life story for sure, but it draws a lot on culture and family expectations and just like the corporate hustle almost. This like toxic hustle culture. Sometimes that's not the best thing for you. Jumping off that topic and kind of continuing on with it, we have Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. I actually almost didn't put this one on the list because it is a little bit longer. I want to say it's like closer to 270 pages. So it is a little bit on the longer side, but it reads really fast. I actually read this during, I think, one of the 72-hour readathons. So it's definitely one you can get through really quickly. And this almost reads like a memoir, but like obviously fictitious. And it's about this woman who, again, is like in this corporate, like she's a cog in the wheel, and she doesn't necessarily like want that for her life. It's told in a very non-linear perspective, which I think is really interesting, and that's why it kind of lends itself to feeling like a memoir. So if you are a nonfiction reader but you're looking for something in this genre for the Amazing Readathon, this is a great opportunity for you to pick this up because it definitely reads like nonfiction. It's just not a real person. But I think if you've ever worked in a corporate job, this book is going to speak to you. Because there's so much conversation about like, what are you doing? Like, what does your life amount to when you're just working for a corporation? Like, what are you doing other than like furthering the bottom line of a company that does not give a crap about you? And it's, I don't know, it's just eye-opening. It's enlightening. It kind of has a similar feel to the dystopian book The Circle, I believe is what it's called. That's what I was kind of like referring to when I was reading this the first time. Obviously that one is a little bit more like dystopian than this is. This feels like a contemporary story. This feels like it was a real person that's talking about it. But it's a quick read, and I think you'll gain a lot from it. Lastly, we have That Could Be Enough by Alyssa Cole. Now, Alyssa Cole usually writes contemporary royal romances or thrillers. This is a historical romance that takes place after the play Hamilton. And it's actually Hamilton's wife, or she's a character in it, and it is a woman who is working for the Hamiltons, or working with them, and then it is a sapphic relationship. And this book was so good because it really showed the reality of queer relationships in the 1700s, because obviously like we had queer people then. Like this isn't a new phenomenon. It's just that they weren't talked about. It's not something you see in historical text. So to be able to shine a light on a queer relationship, obviously fictitious, but like a queer relationship post-Revolutionary War was just refreshing. And it's not a romance in the sense that like there's a lot of steam, but the relationship between the two women are just chef's kiss. Finally, we have the sci-fi novellas. And weirdly enough, I have more of these than any other genre, which I don't know how that happened. I'm going to quickly talk about the Monk and Robot series. So we have A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I'm not going to talk about these in detail because this is actually a host favorite of Brittany's. So I feel like a lot of people have already read this for the Amazing Readathon, but this is a very cute, whimsical story about a tea monk who is just trying to like fulfill their passion of like making people happy and bringing them joy by making them tea. They go around to these different villages and make tea for people, and it's such a quiet, cozy life. And along the way, they meet this robot named Mosscap. The robot has a lot of questions about humanity. Back in the day, there was this great war between humans and robots, and the robots went kind of like, not extinct, but like they shut down. And now Mosscap is back. Mosscap is the cutest character ever, like in literature. Love Mosscap. This is a duology, so there's 2 books, and if you do read it, then you'll get extra GRC for the readathon, so that is a good thing. Then we have The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Older. This is a lot packed into a little package. Do I think that this book would have been better as a full-length novel? Perhaps. But I still enjoyed it. This is a gas lamp mystery with a sapphic relationship set on Jupiter. A lot in one book. It kind of has a Sherlock Holmes and Watson vibe to it, with our 2 characters, but like then they're queer. It's real cute. And there's a mystery involved. It's a very quick read, and there is a second book into the series. I have not read it yet though, but potentially might. I don't know. I have my pile of possibilities for this weekend is way too big. Then we have the Murderbot series. This is a series of novellas. There are 4 novellas and then a novel and then a couple more novellas, I think. And this is about a robot, a murderbot to be exact. But Murderbot really does not want to murder. Murderbot just wants to watch his shows. He just wants to be left alone. Like, honestly, so relatable, my friend. This series is really, really cool because it feels very episodic, right? Like, each story kind of has its own little story arc. It's kind of like reading issues or like stories in manga or in a graphic novel, comics, whatever. Like, each little chapter has, or each book feels like a chapter in Murderbot's story. They are their own, like, unique stories, but then they all build on each other, if that makes any sense. I've read the first of the novellas. I'm on the full-length novel now, but like, highly recommend. And then I'm going to end with actually a couple of books that I read for Face Off Weekend last year. So the first series is the Littenverse series. So we have Finna, which is first, and then Defect, which is second. These are hella queer. It's if IKEA had a portal universe to a not great place, and also everyone was gay. Very much enjoyed this one. This one I didn't love as much, but I know that like a lot of people do love it. I think I'm very much in the minority of it, but they are very, very quick reads and the audiobooks are great. And then we have Hard Reboot by Django Wexler. The Django usually writes like big epic fantasy stories. I want a full-length novel in this, but I will take what I can get. Our main character is an academic. She's on a mission to Old Earth. She ends up in a con. She's tricked into wagering a ton of money in these manned bot fights, or these like manned robots. Essentially they have like droid fighting, like robot fighting, bot wars essentially, but like to the death. This was a really, really fun story. It was a little bit of a fever dream when I read it because it was Face Off last year, but it was such a unique story. It was such a like fun premise, and I love Django's writing. I love his stories. Those are a bunch of short books that you can add to your TBR. Let me know down in the comments below a book that you are excited to read this weekend for Face Off, and if you're not participating in the Amazing Readathon, just let me know a novella that you recommend. If you're not feeling chatty, do the running emoji, because we are on a race. That's all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!
Told you this was temporary, didn't I? But you changed my mind like the weather when I saw you wearing my sweatshirt. Told myself I wasn't ready, terrified.